Going to begin this second hour with Aaron Derfel, the health reporter at the Montreal Gazette, has begun to publish a series of stories about deaths at the Lakeshore General Hospital ER that could have been prevented. Story dropped on Friday about an SQ officer, in fact, that committed suicide. And a whistleblower there says that that is a death that could have been prevented. And now this morning, another story from Aaron Derfel about how over a period of less than 12 months, nurses working at the Lakeshore Hospital ER flagged the deaths of 3 ER patients to the office of Health Minister Christian Dubé. Each death was said to have occurred under controversial circumstances that nurses say were a result of systemic negligence. Yet despite them being flagged, it has been revealed that the Minister of Health's inner circle did not intervene. Aaron Derfel is on the line. Aaron, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Elias.
First things first, Aaron, in light of everything that's happening in the media, in light of everything that's happened in the Montreal Gazette, how much time, effort, months went into the stories that you are breaking that started all on Friday and continue into this morning?
Well, it was 4 months, Elias. This type of journalism takes a lot of time because you need to really button down all the details. You need to document everything. A lot of work goes into that, and that's why it's so important to support local journalism and to support the Montreal Gazette, in my opinion.
And Aaron, listen, I'm not going to belabor this point here, but we'll get into the story. If you worked at an outlet that was primarily an online publication that went for quick hits and clickbait, could you pull off journalism like this? Impossible, right? Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make that point with an emphasis to begin because there's a vital role that the Gazette has and that you have in our city. So let's get to the story here. How did it come to you, Aaron? When did you, at what point did you say, okay, I got to start writing this story?
Well, when you'll recall a few months ago that a mediator, Marie Boucher, released a 317-page report on the Lakeshore calling it a ticking time bomb. And at the time, there was a lot of media coverage about that because she called it a ticking time bomb. And when I delved through the report, I came across these statistics that the number of deaths at the Lakeshore ER had soared by 18%, in a period of, I think it was less than 4 years. And that was shocking to me because I know that provincially there's been a big increase. But that increase has been 7.7%. So the increase at the Lakeshore was more than double. So this is when I decided, there's a bigger story here. And I tried to answer the question in Boucher's report, why did she arrive at the conclusion that this is a ticking time bomb? And so that's why I just felt, speaking to these sources, and I had 6 of them, that I needed information to show that this, this is not an isolated incident, that there's a pattern that's going on. And what's happening here is that it's not just the Lakeshore. The Lakeshore is emblematic of what's going on across the province. ERs are overcrowded, they're under-resourced, and in that context, more errors are being committed and more people are dying. And this is something the public really needs to know about.
Yeah, and each of these deaths, is a person losing their life. And some of these stories all the stories are heartbreaking, but some of these you've already been highlighting. So why don't you tell our listeners about some of the stories you've learned of that are particularly heartbreaking?
Okay, so apart from the suicide by hanging of a retired Quebec officer, and by the way, that the call bell cord that this officer used to hang himself, it was in place for 4 years. After the Gazette ran the story, they finally, after 4 years, removed that call bell cord, and the Lakeshore had told the coroner that they had removed the cord, but in fact, the cord was not removed until after the story ran 4 years later. Apart from that death, Jack Blaze death, there are 5 other deaths. A patient comes in, needs to have a Foley catheter replaced. The patient is supposed to be not by mouth, nothing given by mouth, but somebody gave the patient something by mouth. He aspirated, developed pneumonia, and died the next day. A case where a patient showing up at the ER in severe chest pain with a very heavy cardiac history, was languishing in the ER for 2 days in terrible pain. The only thing they would give him is a Tylenol. He was on the phone with his wife when he suffered a massive heart attack and died. Another case where, a patient showed up with what's known as a thunderclap headache. She had vomited twice, but the triage nurse had mistriaged her. And but even so, she wasn't seen for I think 8 hours by a doctor. By then, she had lapsed into coma and she had died. You'll recall a few months ago or a year ago, there was a story about this Filipina matriarch, Candida Macarin Yanohan, and she had died. Her body was found on the floor of the ER. I uncovered new details about her death that raised very serious questions, and so it's just a litany of very troubling deaths that just scream for action to be carried out to prevent this sort of thing from happening. Because what happens after each death, these are what are known as sentinel deaths. Something horrible happened. There was a breakdown. There was an error. There was an oversight. What should happen, according to provincial guidelines, is they need to come up with a plan. They need to get the people involved, to go over this to ensure that these errors don't happen. But these meetings are not held. These sources say that after these deaths occurred, everything was swept under the carpet. Not only that, but the families were not told of the true circumstances of the deaths, which would be a violation of the law. It's very, very, very serious, Elias.
We are with Aaron Derfel from the Montreal Gazette, health reporter with the Montreal Gazette. And of course, the Gazette has just begun publishing a series from Aaron Derfel, taking a look at deaths at the Lakeshore General Hospital ER. Aaron, you bring up how serious this is. Mistakes happen in every hospital. Human error. We're humans. We make mistakes. What is the side of this that makes it so egregious that you have the whistleblowers coming to you and the whistleblowers that you've approached here to tell you the story of what's really happening?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. To err is human, but if you're working in an institution where the medical equipment is malfunctioning, where the ER layout is confusing, it hasn't been renovated in decades, there's a shortage of staff, a high turnover, poor training, lax supervision, the likelihood of more of errors increases. Okay, and so what these ER sources did internally is, they tried to resolve it internally, right? Nothing was done. They tried to use the tip line, the provincial tip line, hotline. Nothing was done, and growing frustrated. That's when some of these nurses flagged at least half of the deaths that I documented to the health minister's office. Now, the sources received emails acknowledging receipt of their emails, but there was no follow through, inquiring, what more can you share with us? So they were just so frustrated that at every step, they felt that authorities turned a blind eye, felt they had no choice but to go to the press.
And this leads me to my next question here, and I think it relates to your reporting this morning, the second part of your series here, just how much Christian Dubé, the health minister, knew. So what can you tell us about the health minister, what he knew, how he's handling this information? Okay,
well, on that score, I contacted his press attaché, who said he would get back to me on this, and he never did. But in the meantime, you do have André Fortin, who's the opposition health critic for the Quebec Liberal Party, who's urging Premier François Legault to hold an independent investigation into the crisis at Lakeshore to address these very deep-seated and lingering problems.
Aaron, part 2 in this series, there's more to come on this one, isn't there?
Yes. There are 2 more parts, and I don't want to go into too many details, but each part is very strong. And why is each part very strong? I mean, I would just want to convey to the public, to the readers, that this is really a provincial shame what's going on. That the government announced a crisis cell. Critics were saying, "Oh, well, that's just PR speak, crisis cell." A few months later, the ERs are still overcrowded. What's happening here? So, I just felt that this series has to be strong. It's got to shock the authorities into finally acting.
You can read Aaron Derfel's journalism on the Montreal Gazette website or pick up a copy. First part was published on Friday, second part today, and there's 2 more parts coming. Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time with our listeners to share just a brief aspect, a little aspect of your reporting, and the full details, of course, are in the paper. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.